kind of weird because the camera doesn't sing back to me. So I'm kind of used to that. Blessed are the ones who do not bury all the broken pieces of their heart. Blessed are the tears of all the weary, pouring like a sky falling stars. Blessed are the wounded ones in mourning, brave enough to show the Lord their scars. Blessed are the hurts that are not hidden, open to the healing touch of God. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. Blessed are the ones who walk in kindness, even in the face of great abuse. Blessed are the deeds that go unnoticed, serving with unguarded gratitude. Blessed are the ones who fight for justice, longing for the coming day of peace. Blessed is the soul that thirsts for righteousness, welcoming the last, the lost, the least. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. Hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. Blessed are the ones who suffer violence, they still have strength to love their enemies. Blessed is the faith of those who persevere. Though they fall, they'll never know defeat. The kingdom is yours. The kingdom is yours. Hold on a little more. This is not the end. The hope is in the Lord. Keep your eyes on Him. Hold on a
Well, peace, friends. I'm Pastor Tom Arthur from Sycamore Creek Church in Lansing, Michigan, and I'm the team leader for the Reach movement, a movement of churches that are growing and multiplying disciples of Jesus Christ so that we can transform the world in love and justice. This afternoon, I feel like I'm going to be interviewing a new old friend. Wendy Hudson is the founding pastor of Two Rivers Church in Charleston, South Carolina. And we connected a few months ago, Wendy, through a mutual friend who saw that we were kind of doing something similar and said we needed to meet. And well, here we are today.
It's been wonderful.
We hit it off pretty quickly because I think we've been traveling in similar directions in the pandemic and maybe post-pandemic path, not only in styles of worship, but also our increasing focus. Well, you're a new church, so you just had this focus right off the bat, but our increasing focus on justice and inclusion. And our goal, at least as a church, is to love more like Jesus loved and invite others into that relationship with Christ and community with the church. So Two Rivers website, Wendy, says that you're not just another church. Seriously, like Jesus, we're committed to taking bold action that leads to equity, justice, inclusion, and belonging. It's not easy, but it's what we're made for.
Yes.
That's what your church is made for from the very get-go. So I can't wait to hear more about that. Well, I'm going to be hearing it. I mean, we've been talking for a couple of months now, so I've been hearing all about it, but I'm excited to join other people and let them sit in on this conversation. So friends, if you're here, let us know, give us a shout out, and welcome Wendy in the comments section. Thank you so much for being here, Wendy.
I'm really happy to be here. Anytime I get to talk about Two Rivers, it is hands down my favorite thing to do no matter what, but love to talk about the work that we're doing because I don't, like our website says, we believe that this is what the church is made for, but we also believe this is what each of us as individuals are made for and called to as we follow Jesus. So yeah, I'm excited.
Hey, I think we have an Elijah box today on our live stream here. We have this black box that showed up. We've been on like behind the scenes on Restream for like an hour and everything was going fine. And then 5 minutes before we went live, this black box showed up. So I'm calling it the Elijah box.
Very good.
Maybe
it is holding space for everyone to feel like they're participating in the conversation.
Yes.
It's not just the two of us. This represents everyone else who's out there.
This is like great, example of somebody who's pretty technologically proficient, and it's still like the wheels haven't fallen off, but there is a big dent in the side of the car, so we're driving it down the street. But technology, what can you say? Yes. Friends, we would love for you to like, share, and subscribe this video and to our Reach Movement page so that you can stay up to date on everything that we've got going on. So Wendy, let's kick off this webinar by having you tell us a little bit about your own history as a United Methodist pastor and also the backstory of Two Rivers Church.
Sure. Well, I am a cradle Methodist. I was, my parents still attend the church, the United Methodist Church here in South Carolina that they were attending when I was born, and can trace my whole call to ministry up both through the United Methodist Church, but particularly through those acts of community. My local church was so important to me. I was nurtured and taught the faith in children's Sunday school. Miss Cherry and Miss Flanders were my third grade Sunday school teachers and taught me to have a deep love and affection for the Bible and for scripture.
You still remember their names?
I do. They were, yes. And I'm actually, the beauty of social media is that I'm still get to be in touch with some of them, with Miss Cherry, even now, which is pretty fun to get to have that connection with her. I remember sitting, sweet women when I was having a teenage crisis, as one tends to do, like sitting with me in the bathroom as I was crying, nurturing me, feeling a call to ministry, but not being able to fully articulate that. But when I was in the 4th grade, I just knew that I wanted to be part of this community that had nurtured me, that loved me, that cared for me, and that I was starting to see was reaching out into the world. And so after was really involved in my campus ministry when I was in college, that was really a pivotal and formative experience that I had, and really being introduced to who Jesus was, both for me and having that deep connection to Jesus, but also who Jesus is in the world, and how we're called to be out in the world as well. And so I've been serving full-time in churches now for 17 years. And 4 years ago, almost 4 years ago, was asked to go and start a new United Methodist Church here in Charleston. And so did what we call a parachute drop, which is, I like to say, a terrible way to start a church, which is where they sent me and my family out and said, okay, here, go to this 8-mile stretch of road. Bye, have a good time.
Yeah, you unpack that word parachute drop a little bit more. Sure. I mean, if you're in the church planting world, it's definitely a thing that you know about. And at least in Michigan, we're kind of going away from that more and more. But tell us, unpack that word.
Yeah. So here in our area, our leaders identified a growing the last developing part of the Charleston region, which is one of the fastest growing regions in the state, where there was they felt like the United Methodist Church was underrepresented. And so they, asked me if I would move out to this area and start a church from scratch. And so I was given some financial resources, but that was about it. And so no people came along with me. It was just me and my family. And then I had 2 friends, one of whom already lived out here and one of whom was connected immediately by the vision that we had for what we wanted a new church to be like. And so
did you grow up in Charleston?
I did not. I'd been here for 6 years. So I'd been serving already in Charleston for 6 years and just moved 8 miles away.
Gotcha.
But I grew up in South Carolina.
So you were familiar somewhat. You had a benefit there of not just dropping parachute into some town that you.
Right. I wasn't a total stranger.
Yeah.
And so that's what I did. So because I'd been here 6 years already, I just spent the first 6 months calling every person I knew in Charleston who did not go to church. And I did 450 coffees, lunches, and dinners in the first 2 years.
450.
I really like coffee. And so that's a very positive thing. And I love talking to people and hearing stories. And so really that's what it was. It was just like listening to people's stories. Mm-hmm. Sometimes we talked about church. Sometimes we didn't. Sometimes we talked about what folks were experiencing in their community or in their family. Mm-hmm. Lots and lots and lots of listening. And so,
what did you hear as you were listening to those 450 people besides the buzz of caffeine in your ear?
Yes, a lot of that. What I was really hearing from folks, because I was talking at first to folks who were in my same life stage. So I had young kids, elementary school age kids at the time. And so, kind of some folks who were in that similar setting. And I was hearing a lot of weariness, a lot of isolation, a lot of loneliness, of some that can come when you're kind of at that season of your intense parenting life. But then I was able to start really connecting with a lot of folks who were in their 20s. And I loved hearing their stories. And especially our folks in their 20s who I was talking with, they were sharing these stories about how they had grown up in a church, or maybe they had a grandparent who took them to church. And many of them had a deep curiosity about what a life with God was like. A lot of them had a lot of harm done to them in a church. And so I like to say, they had walked away from the church, but they just somehow could not let go of Jesus. And so kept being pulled back in spite of themselves, in spite of what had happened to the church. They kept being pulled back, wanting to have some kind of connection with the faith community. And I kept hearing a lot of people say, I'm the only person like me that I know in Charleston. So a lot of our folks were, politically on the left or progressive, definitely had a more, religious openness to them than what they had experienced growing up. We live in the Deep South, lots of religious fundamentalism, a lot of political fundamentalism, and folks felt like they were hiding who they really were because they didn't know anybody else who thought like they did, believed like they did, or had the questions that they had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. One of the things when I hear you talk, and this is something that I feel like I connected with you pretty quickly on, I don't get this a lot, is when I engage with Christians as a whole, but a real desire for Jesus, a kind of evangelistic zeal, a church planting. You can't plant a church without being interested in connecting with more people. Like,
yes,
you have to do that. But then on the other side, this sort of justice and inclusion. So like Jesus and justice and a kind of joint passion for both of those things. And I'm hearing it now a little bit in this origin story of sitting with 450 different people talking to them.
And that's, at one time when I first came back to South Carolina, I'd spent several years in Eastern Pennsylvania, serving as United Methodist pastor, and I was coming back to South Carolina, and I had previously in Pennsylvania, I had been involved in the Methodist Federation for Social Action, so very much like a social justice oriented group. But I also have a deep love for, the word evangelism is pretty loaded, but at its heart, it just means sharing good news, and like talking about Jesus and telling others about Jesus. That really is the heart of what evangelism is. And so I, in some of the paperwork I had to fill out, I had listed both of those. And one of the folks on this committee that was interviewing me to see if I was fit for service in South Carolina, very aggressively said, "You say you're a member of the Methodist Federation for Social Action, yet you also say that you have a passion for evangelism. Those two things can't go together. What do you say for yourself?" I was like, well, they can go together because that's what I do. But, to me, the heart of Jesus, the heart of good news is this idea that God is for all of us. And if God is for all of us, that inherently is a statement of justice and rightness and right relationship, of wholeness and completeness. Like all of that is found in the life of Jesus. Like if you do nothing but read the story of the life of Jesus, that is what you're going to see and uncover, story after story after story. Which means that also, if we're going to talk about Jesus and like how you say, you're going to love like Jesus, then we have to live like Jesus. And that means pursuing these relationships of rightness and wholeness in all that we do.
There's something really infectious about, no pun intended, about how you talk about the life of faith and following Jesus. I mean, you have just a great, enthusiasm, passion. And I think one of the things that we were your Stanton, what's his job description title again?
He's our creative director.
Creative director. Stanton was going to join us, but then he had something come up work related and wasn't able to at the last moment, which we would have liked to have him on here a moment ago, because he maybe could have figured out this black box that we have, which we've now decided is just a box to include anybody who's not included in the conversation. But you then shifted. I don't know. Tell us that movement into COVID, and we have a little clip from your Easter. Set that up for us. You have this really unique sort of talk show format, which is what the person that our mutual acquaintance connected us on because of that.
Yeah. So when we started off, we did like everybody else did, in that COVID shift and moved everything digitally, which, we had not even had our second birthday. We had our second birthday, at the very beginning of COVID. So we were still brand new. Chronologically, we're, majority 20s and 30s. So we already lived a lot of our life online. It was that transition for us was pretty easy. But Stanton and I both have can have short attention spans and we get bored easily. So like everybody else, we would, we started off COVID filming individual pieces in our living rooms, and then he stitched them all together. And, after a few weeks, we got bored of just seeing 2 or 3 faces. So we started inviting our church members to start sending in, clips of themselves, and we expanded that way. And after a while, we got bored of that. And so we shifted to actually using this streaming platform, Restream, where we could then bring in guests from all over the country and all over our community and have a more vibrant conversation. And we really then started shifting into what we call podcast sermons, to where I would have a guest on who would be an expert or have lived experience around the topic or scripture that we were exploring. And then once vaccines became widely available, we were able to shift. We actually set up a recording studio in the first floor of Stanton's house. And until recently, that has been, we go live from the studio and are able to have in-studio guests. And so you're going to be able to see Nicole Houston, who's also one of the pastors at Two Rivers, and she was able to be there with us on Easter.
Yeah, so this is, we just have about a 40-second clip from your Easter, just to give people a feel for what things were like, because you shifted here, and we're gonna show that in just a minute. But let's go and see kind of the apex of what, during the pandemic, what ministry and worship looked like for you. So Leslie, go ahead and fire that video.
As we close, I think it's important just to remind ourselves that we put a lot of pressure on this day. It is Easter Sunday. It's a big day in the Christian year. And sometimes that leads us to believe that resurrection only happens on one day for us.
Right. And it actually is something that happens every day, that we have access to every moment of our life. It's not just a singular event, but like we talked about, it's a narrative. It's a new way of being.
Yeah. So this week and in the weeks to come, I want to encourage everyone to look for the moments of resurrection, the seasons of resurrection, even the minutes of resurrection that are happening all around us.
Exactly.
So that's just what I love about this. And it's, for those of you who are watching on Facebook, there's something happening from the movement from here into Restream. The Restream is possessed today or something. It's putting it out of whack, and it doesn't look quite as beautiful as it does here, and it's original. But let's get Wendy back on here.
Here we go.
But I like it's a very simple. It was a very simple setup, but very beautiful. So talk about Stanton's role, or like the technological role to create that.
Sure. We're so gifted and so fortunate in that Stanton is, but he's a marketing professional in his day job. And so, which means sometimes, emergencies come up in communications. So that's what he's doing today. So he not only has, this real skill in, communication, but he also has a technological background to go along with it. And so when we were talking about making, the shift digitally, and then as, we've had these, like every 2 to 3 months, we kind of shift slightly what that experience, that online experience has looked like. And so we, decided kind of the scene that we wanted to set. And we had been, from our living rooms for, so many months already. So when we shifted to the studio, we wanted to be able to bring that living room feeling, because that's where we had been. That's where our folks had a lot of comfort, where we had a lot of experience, continue to experience a lot of connection around that. And so you can see that, in the background that we have, these are living room chairs. We're in front of, normal bookcases. And we wanted to make it as engaging, as relatable, and as normal as possible. I think that's
what I liked about it was that it adapts to the form that you're engaging in. And I think a lot of pastors and churches didn't think very creatively about how to adapt to the expectations of being online. It was just, we just broadcast what we normally would do without adapting it. And you called it a podcast sermon.
Right.
My sermons lately have been almost like vlog YouTuber sermons. Yeah. I love that adaptation.
And I think, that's a gift, because we were so young when COVID happened. We had, our first few months we spent worshiping in a horse barn. And then we spent, our first year in an English pub. And then we spent, part of our second year in a high school cafeteria. So we had already had a lot of experience adapting to the space that we were in. And so when we moved online, it was, pretty easy. So like, it was a fourth adaptation into the different space.
And recognizing that space, and in the midst of recognizing the space, you kind of respect the space and what it expects of you and of its those who engage it. So this past Sunday, you had I think this was your first kind of outdoor, right?
Yes, it was our first in-person gathering since COVID. Yeah.
So it's beautiful. Set the stage for us, and then we've got about a 3-minute clip we want to show of that. So this is a move really to a different format again, in a different space.
Yes. So we had been meeting at a high school to which the school is still not allowing access. School district still isn't allowing access, and so we had we've been able to maintain really strong connection and community, but it was time. It was time for us to get back together. We have a very high vaccination rate in our church community, and we knew we could gather safely outdoors. And so I was able to connect with a local brewery owner who is values aligned with us. And we had talked pre-COVID about doing some things together. So I reached out to him and I said, any way that we could meet in your space a couple of Sundays a month. And he was like, yes, of course. And so I gave him the first date. And when I looked up their calendars, Common House Ale Works, when I looked up their calendar that day, they were in the midst of hosting the last day of a week-long Park Circle Pride celebration. So community pride celebration. Common House was one of the main sponsors of that week. And so I was like, hey, how about we make this worship service a pride worship service, to be able to connect with what you're already doing as a business owner, to be able to connect with the community. And really it represents who we are as a faith community as well. And he was, said yes immediately. And so we were able to enter into this really beautiful space. They call it their common ground. Common House Ale Works is their name, and they have this common ground space. And so they allowed us to have access to that. And we were able to make it a celebration, part of the official Pride celebration, and our first Sunday back. And so again, really, like you say, like adapting to the gifts of the space and the occasion.
All right. Well, Leslie, let's fire that video. This is about a 3-minute video of you kind of setting the stage for worship.
Friends, good morning. My name is Wendy. I'm the lead pastor here. My pronouns are she and her. And welcome to the first Two Rivers worship service in a really long time. But friends, the first of a brand new season for all of our lives. So we are so happy that you are here, especially those of you who are here with us for the first time. It's been delightful to see people I've only seen on little tiny computer screens, and to get to meet them in real life. This is one of the best days. So we're really glad that you're here. At our welcome tent, if you had a chance to stop by, and you can run over there, you'll see there are these little quarter sheets, and if you scan the QR code, everything that you need for today is right on that QR code. It'll pull up to our worship guide website, and you can follow along. You'll see their little plus signs out to the side, and that will bring down the lyrics for the songs that we're singing and our scripture passage for today. Our Connect card, if you are worshiping with us for the first time, we are so glad. We want to be able to connect with you, so fill out one of those Connect cards, and we'll make sure to be in touch with you this week. So lots of fun ways. If you want to learn a little more about us, you'll also find there's some Begin Again books. This really gives you an overview of who we are as a community and how we order and pattern our lives together. And so we'd love for you to be able to take one of these and become part of who we are here at Two Rivers Church. We want to thank very much today our host here at Common House. Pierce Fleming is right here. Let's all give a sign of our Thanksgiving to Pierce. They have been incredible partners. Park Circle Pride is really Pierce's brainchild, along with several other merchants here in Park Circle. And this has been an incredible 5 days of activities, and it continues on today. So thank you for letting us be a part of all the good work that you're doing. So friends, we are here. It is time us. We have been gathered in lots of spaces for lots of months, and now we're gathered in one space. And I want to especially welcome our folks who are live streaming with us. We have become an international community. Over this past year, we've got folks who watch us in multiple continents, multiple cities. So if you are here with us on our live stream, we're really happy that you're here. And so we just want to say you also are part of who we are, no matter where you might be located. We believe in the power of ritual, the power of doing certain things together that keep us connected to God and to one another. And one of those rituals that we do every week is we light a candle. It's a reminder to us that the Spirit and power and presence of God is here with us. And so today we light this candle. Maybe. Somebody smarter than me want to light the candle. There we go. Before we started, we said, perfection is not the goal today. So at least we got this out of the way.
I have never said that in my life.
Friends, we are real here. You can bring your real self, your whole self, yourself that doesn't know how to work the little flickers. No matter who you are, no matter where you are, no matter what's happening in your life, this space belongs to you.
You had to show the part where I don't know how to work a flicker.
You know, that's part of the beauty of that moment. And I actually love the tension there between Stanton saying,
Oh, yeah.
that is, you know, not necessarily is something that's ever come out of his mouth. And you're like, you know, well, we're just gonna be authentic and make mistakes. And
Yeah.
and I think that shows a little bit about like that creative director and the pastor, your teamwork there. Like unpack that for us. Just
Yeah, I mean, that's one of the great gifts. Stanton was part of our launch team when he was our first employee, but he was a member of our launch team first before that. And so it came on with the heart and the connection to create a community that was both fully inclusive and Jesus centered. We had from the very beginning, that was, part of who we are. And so we didn't have to hire him and train him up in kind of who we wanted to be. We have formed who we are together. And I will say that little moment right there encapsulates our entire relationship for 3 years. I'm always like driving him crazy with like wild off hair things, but he's always keeping us focused on like, what is our language? What is our mission? How do we speak so that those who need to hear about Jesus, to hear that they have a community they can belong to, how do we need to speak clearly to them so that they know that this is a place for them? And so it's that is a wonderful interplay of kind of who we are, but also how we've been able to form our life together.
yeah, there's something really beautiful besides being very envious of that space. What a gorgeous space. It's probably like a 3-camera setup, I would imagine.
4.
4 cameras.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit about, you were telling me right before, like who showed up and what they did to make it look that beautiful.
Yes. So 2 of folks who are part of our community own a photography business called Glad Films, and their bread and butter is really weddings, and they do both wedding photography, but also they make these beautiful films, usually 5 to 8 minutes, not just of the wedding, but about the entire couple. They are the most beautiful acts of storytelling. So when we scheduled this event, and we actually did a baptism at the ocean a couple of weeks before, I reached out to them and asked, would they be able to come and film and put together a small film for us for both of these occasions, because I knew we wanted to capture them. And Melody and Glad were saying that, they're asked what we're doing for live stream. And I said, I didn't have any idea. And they said, well, the cameras that we would set up to record, we also can live stream on. Would you just like for us to do that? And I said, yes, thank you so much. And so they were able to both live stream, and they have put together a beautiful film that'll be on both our website and our, all of our social media, Two Rivers CHS on all social media. We're putting that up this weekend, this beautiful short film. of the day. And so because it felt so immersive. That was the takeaway that we had when we went back and watched it the next day, was it felt so immersive. And so we're going to be worshiping in that space twice a month for the summer. And so we've hired them to come back again. They have been generous and gave us a discount, but we are very willing to pay for that ability to have this vibrant connection between our, fully online and fully in person experience, to try and make that as seamless and connected as possible.
Well, that you're kind of pointing towards this next thing of what you're thinking about for the future. And I think what I heard you say is you're going to do this live in-person thing twice a month. And then are you going to do this more talk show format back in Stanton's house?
We are. Yes. Yep. So, that we wanted to kind of step back into regathering. We're a pretty cautious community, health and safety wise, but also realizing that the gift of COVID is that we've been able, we really have expanded our reach. So when we, showed up on Sunday, on June 6th for our first in-person experience, we doubled the number of people that we had pre-COVID in person. Which was really surprising to us, plus all of our online folks. And so, over COVID, we tripled our worshiping community, which was really exciting. And so we know that is such an important part of who we are, but also it's responsive to people's lives. It is, it's a real thing to be able to stay in your pajamas and worship and to be connected to your community. It's a real thing not to have to get your kids dressed and drag them out, to go to worship. It's a real thing to be able to connect in some vulnerable ways through written comments that we can't do when we're in person, passively listening to other people talk.
Yeah.
And so what we want to do, over the summer is really kind of play with this interplay of in-person and online, both happening at the same time, and then alternating those as well.
So there's a couple things I want to pull out of what you just said. One is you've hired this team of videographers.
Yeah.
You also have Stanton on staff as a creative director. There's resources that are required to do what you want to do, both have in-person and online, and do it well and do it excellently and do it creatively, while also maintaining the freedom that sometimes the flicker doesn't work.
Yeah.
But then you also have this emphasis on justice. And I feel like sometimes pastors who have the emphasis on justice don't also have that emphasis on creative excellence. Talk about that unique connection that happens at Two Rivers.
Yeah. From the beginning of our time together, we actually spent the first year of our life together. At the end of every worship experience, Stanton and I and a couple of others would gather together, and we would review every word that was said, every illustration that was used, every transition moment that we had, every song lyric, to make sure that we were speaking like normal people speak. Because those of us who are pastors, we've often been raised in churches. We went to, college, and then we went to seminary, and we were taught all these big words, and we had this whole church vocabulary that like this teeny tiny sliver of the world understands. But the rest of the world out there doesn't speak that language, but they have a hunger and a desire for a connection to God. And we can offer them that connection, through Jesus. But we have to speak their language. And so often the language that we speak in the church is not a language that other people can connect to. And to me, that's part of that merging of justice and Jesus, like merging those two together really starts at the heart of the language that we use. And it was a year of us unlearning churchy language and learning normal people language. But that's a commitment to excellence. We have this rigorous accountability that we hold ourselves to as, leaders, both as staff and as our leadership team, as our broader leadership team. We have this commitment to excellence and rigorous accountability, because the mission is so important, which is helping other people connect to God and connect to each other. And so we have to be excellent in that work, because it is literal life-saving work. I mean, that's how high the stakes are, because the folks who come to us are folks who, by and large, have felt very isolated, very alone. Our work saves lives. And changes lives in really significant ways. And that's justice work, and that's Jesus work.
Yeah. I think you have a special guest coming up, and we maybe have a picture of that that kind of gets at what you're about.
Yes.
Tell us, is this Sunday?
This was last Sunday, the most recent Sunday that we had. Patio Furniture is our state's and really the Southeast premier drag queen. She performs very frequently in Charleston, but she is also a United Methodist. Her mother was a very, very involved United Methodist, and Patty still has a membership at a United Methodist Church in the upper part of the state, but has been, that experience of being formed in a community of Jesus followers really is a driving force behind her work as a drag queen. And so it's been really wonderful that we've been able to make this connection. And Patty's going to join us in street clothes, in his normal everyday attire this Sunday, just to be part of our worshiping community. Because we're meeting back in person again at Common House, and he's in town, and so he's going to stop by and just worship with us, because that's part of what we do, is we make space. We make space for everybody.
Yeah, I don't. The average United Methodist Church is probably going to struggle a little bit with thinking about how to welcome somebody like Patty. And again, what you're saying is that this is life-saving for folks like Patty, or anybody who's perhaps not hetero, cisgender, so on.
White. Yep.
White.
Exactly.
Yeah. We haven't talked as much here about the anti-racism emphasis that you have as well. Talk to us about how digital, in-person, what you're doing is also an expression of anti-racism mission.
Sure. Part of, our commitment to full inclusion has been also that very quickly, when we first thought about that commitment, to full inclusion was LGBTQ inclusion. But then, it's pretty sneaky once you start opening the door, to one type of, or one folk community's experience. And imagine that you start opening the door to all other types of communities. So our work is very intersectional. And so we very early on made that commitment to be anti-racist as well as LGBTQ, fully inclusive, because we always believe that pride stands at the intersection of both of those lived realities. And so part of what we have made a real effort to do is to make sure that our community in worship leadership is fully reflective of who comes and fully reflective of our commitments. And so, we're just bringing on someone else into our community and staff who is a Black queer person, because we know that is at the heart of who we are and who we need to be. And so we're really intentional about who shows up, about who speaks, about who we invite, and share in leadership, both in our formal leadership structures, sharing leadership in our worship, sharing leadership in our small groups. And so making sure that we have integrity in how we live out every part of our life is very important to who we are.
Yeah, and that's something I've heard. We didn't display that as well. In fact, we probably could have done better in finding some other clips that showed some of that in your services. But often on a regular basis, it's not just white people who are on the screen.
No.
And as you said, I think, Sycamore Creek's movement has been a little bit the other direction than yours. You started out with LGBTQ inclusion and ended up also saying, well, anti-racism is important. We've been more anti-racism as the work that we got into, and then we realized the LGBTQ piece is also a component or intersectional in that, in the way that you described that. But in all those instances, having people on the stage is not just window dressing for you, but it's also making sure that the things that are important to them and the issues that are important to them matter to the church, and topics and so on. And I love seeing that in your church. Again, that emphasis of like reaching out to new people for Jesus, but also speaking to the issues that matter to them.
Because that's what Jesus did.
Yeah.
I mean, like that's the heart of who he was.
We want to welcome, if anybody who's watching wants to ask a question of Wendy, feel free to put it in the comments, and we'll bring it up here in just a little bit. Wendy, think with me for a minute. Post COVID, it may or Lord have mercy that there's not a variant that works its way around our vaccines.
Right.
But let's assume that things continue go in the direction that we're going in, of more vaccinations and infection rates go down, and perhaps by the fall sometime there's a vaccination for our children.
Yes.
Which, at least in my church, that's the real kind of sticking point right now, is how to include children and young families. But imagine that moment. What are you carrying on past this pandemic that you wouldn't have thought to do, or a form to take? Are you keeping this online presence? What does that look like?
Yeah, we've been real clear that we will always have a gathering at 10 a.m. on Sunday mornings digitally. Like that, I mean, that's a full commitment from us for the world, because as I said, in that clip that you played earlier, we are an international church. We have folks who worship with us regularly who live in Mexico. We just recently had someone reach out to us who lives in Montenegro to ask could they enroll their children in our online children's spiritual formation program. I mean, so it's like we have this, and we have folks who participate very, regularly with us who live all over the East Coast, and who count us as their church, even though they've never been physically present with us, and who give regularly, and who participate in our small groups, and who show up and participate in our worship online. And so that is a commitment that we have, because that is our community. We both will have this in person and online, and they both will be equally important and equally present. Now, how does that look like practically? We're still trying to I think we'll be figuring that out as we go along. But some ways that we know that'll look like is right now we're starting some in-person small groups, but we also have online small groups, and those will stay hands down, because if you're trying to do a book club, it is a whole lot easier to be able to dial into a Zoom than it is to try and get your kid to bed, or get a babysitter, or drive somewhere in traffic. So there are a lot of things that will keep online engagement, Sunday morning, online worship as equally valid as in-person worship. There's not a hierarchy between those two. And online small groups and gatherings, all of those things we will hands down keep.
So Mary's got a question for you here. You can see it on the screen. How does this beautiful creative worship play out in service to your community? One of the things that we have engaged with is work with solidarity partners. That's what we call our mission work or our outreach work, because we have really lived into an experience of mutual aid, which is this understanding that the community has within it everything that it needs to thrive, not only to survive, but also to thrive. And so often that shows up in financial ways. Folks often think of mutual aid as like people like contributing money together, but we also see that as people contributing their time and their resources. Perhaps that's access to space, perhaps that's access to relationships, perhaps that's some institutional knowledge or community memory. All of those in a mutual aid approach, there's no hierarchy of needs or hierarchy of gifts.
everything is equal. And so that's one of the ways that shows up in our work. And so we, the way that we connect with Pride, the way that we support organizations that particularly are run by and centered in the lives of marginalized folks. That's always where we show up, and always where we spend our time and our energy and our money and our efforts, particularly in groups that are run by or that serve or that center queer people, people of color, our Black siblings and kin. So that's kind of some of the ways where that shows up. In that, and then we invite those folks to fully participate in our worship as well by having them on as guests, by having them on, to share their knowledge and their lived experiences, to be able to show up in ways that we are invited to show up, not that we suggest that we show up in communities, as full participants in the ways that we've been invited to. And so that's been a pretty wonderful way to develop deep relationships that are based on trust and mutuality and accountability.
Yeah. As you answer that question and I think about it, I think, again, a lot of churches think of maybe the big three when it comes to service to the community, like providing food, providing clothing, providing housing, or utility assistance and so on. And we do that. And I know from talking to you that you do that. But what you've just described is a kind of service to the community that is a kind of legitimization of somebody's existence. And I think about when we had a tent at Pride 2 years ago, because it got canceled last year. And we were the only church there. And just the feeling that us being there created a kind of space of acceptance and welcome and inclusion. And then, like you said, giving space for or a platform for voices, for different voices is a service to the community. And that's not to ignore the food or the clothing or the housing needs and so on, but there are a lot more needs than just that, especially in these two communities that you're trying to connect to. Mary's got another question.
Yeah.
How does the commitment to digital worship work with the band, with those creating and participating in worship and ministry?
Probably the bandwidth. Yeah.
Yeah. With the bandwidth of those. How do you nurture the ministry without burning out the workers? Yeah, I think that's supposed to be bandwidth.
Right. One of the ways that we're doing that very intentionally is stepping back in to in-person worship twice a month. We knew that we as the leaders couldn't and didn't necessarily want to go from 16 months of fully online to all of a sudden fully in person. Like that felt like too much for us. And also for our community too, like that felt like too much at one time. And so we're like, let's do these, I'm not even going to call it stages, because who knows, we might end up doing that forever. But we always make what's the next right choice for right now. And we don't feel like we have to make a choice for what we're going to do in a year, but right now is fine. And so that's one of the ways that, doing this gradual step in. Also, telling folks like, you have to take a vacation. I told our children's spiritual formation person, I was like, I need you to tell me the 4 weeks that you're going to take off between now and the end of the year. I don't care when you take them or how you take them, but I need you to give me those 4 weeks. And she was like, oh, good. I'll take the month of June off. And I was like, fantastic. Go have a good time. And so she's gone. And so we have other ways and people to step into those roles. And so I think that's a lot of those boundaries is like planning, creativity, flexibility, and being able to kind of roll with what's presenting itself to us at the point.
As you're saying that, it's just reminding me of we have a kind of special Sunday coming up between our two churches.
Yes.
My church is going to come to your church.
Yes.
On August 1st. We're going to worship with you, and these are kind of the creative things that this online world facilitates. When in any time in history has a church in Michigan shut down and worshiped with a church in Charleston, South Carolina on a Sunday morning without even leaving our homes? I mean,
exactly.
And I don't know. I don't think it's probably a whole lot more work for you to welcome us, but my team's getting a breather that day.
Yeah.
And the thing is, a church could do that any Sunday with any other church right now in a way that we've never been able to. So there are some creative opportunities. I think Mary raises a good question about bandwidth.
Yeah.
We have multiple campuses. So in July, we're going back and forth. One campus leads worship on one week and the other one takes a breather. The next week, the other campus leads, and then the first campus got a breather. And then we're capping it with on the first, both campuses are shut down, attending church at Two Rivers.
Yes, we can't wait to have you. We're really excited.
Now, is that an outdoor service that Sunday? Or
no,
is
that's one of our fully online services.
That's one of your online services. So, so we're looking forward to that. And friends, I think there's just amazing creative opportunities right now that have never been there before for reaching new people. And Wendy, thank you so much for joining us today to talk about how your church is doing that. Friends, would you join me in thanking God in the comment section for Wendy and for her giving her time today to us. This webinar is brought to you by Reach Resources, which is part of the Reach movement, which is sponsored by the Church Vibrancy team of the Michigan Conference of the United Methodist Church. And in January, we featured Tech Talk, demonstrated how to overcome tech problems, as well as using technology effectively for ministry, moving forward, pandemic and post-pandemic. And you can watch those past webinars on YouTube by searching for Reach Resources, or you can watch them here on Facebook on our Reach Movement MI page under the videos tab. And by the way, viewers, be sure to like our Facebook page. That way you'll stay ahead of the latest Reach Movement news. And plan right now to join our Reach Summit 2021 coming up on October 22nd and 23rd. Nona Jones, the author from Social Media to Social Ministry and Success from the Inside Out, will keynote this event. You can visit reachsummit.org to learn more. I think it's particularly interesting. She wrote that book and published it right before the pandemic hit.
Wow.
And how is social ministry and social media still relevant post-pandemic? So we're looking forward to hearing her thoughts on that. So be sure to check out as well reachresources.org, where there are nearly 30 podcasts with pastors, authors, consultants, and coaches about all kinds of areas of improving ministry. Don't miss this catalog of great conversations plus audio files of all our webinars. Thank you so much for joining us today. I'm going to end the session with a benediction, Wendy, that you offered recently in a Two Rivers church service. So friends, hear this blessing. As you go into this week or this weekend, go into this weekend celebrating pride, celebrating the gift of God's diversity to us, celebrating the gift of God's inclusion to us, celebrating the gift of our beauty and of our belovedness, because this is the way that God has made us. And for these things, we can say, thanks be to God. And all who agreed, they typed, or they said, or they used the prayer emoji. Amen.
Amen.
Peace, friends.
Thanks, friends.